Well, we will get started. I know that a few more people might be trickling in. Welcome, welcome. I'm Elizabeth Benyon. I am a professor of political science and campus director of the American Democracy Project here at Indiana University South Bend, and we have been delighted to co-sponsor this Civic Leadership Academy with the St. Joseph County Public Library. And I would like to give a special word of thanks to Ronna Plummer, who has been working behind the scenes from the St. Joseph County Public Library. As you know, we had great events there. I know that their reach helped get out the message and let lots of folks know about the Academy. And we plan to work together to make some resources for civic engagement available to you, including many of those that have been mentioned over these past 6 weeks. And so that's an exciting project we'll be working on at the conclusion of this series. And we certainly appreciate the partnership of the library and all that they do to help keep Michiana informed. So big thank you to the St. Joseph County Library. Since this is the last event of our series, I have a few more thank yous. Andy Trowbridge, you met last week. She is the lead intern for the American Democracy Project, and she's done a fantastic job behind the scenes making everything happen, not just with this series, but all of our candidate forums and debates and inauguration watch party and debate watch parties and service projects. And so we thank her. Also, Dominique Abbey, who's been our photographer. You've been seeing her. She is a newer member of our team and has been doing a terrific job. And then Rhonda Redman. And you will recognize Rhonda because she's been checking you in with her daughters every week. And Rhonda is another person who has been there for every event throughout the entire year. She is really one of those people who really embodies what we're talking about with this academy of being civically engaged, not only with our organization, but also with the Student Government Association and a number of other organizations. And I am delighted to announce that Rhonda was actually recognized as the Outstanding Senior Leader of the Year for our campus. So congratulations to Rhonda. And then congratulations to those of you who have been coming back week after week. I know that many of you are incredibly active and engaged in the community, and so you're here just to pick up any tips you might be missing, and some of you are a little bit newer in thinking about getting involved. We appreciate you all. Many of you have earned the Civic Leadership Academy certificate, and unless you explicitly told us that you preferred to receive that by email, we have those here for you this evening. And so if you have attended 4 or more events, please do pick one of those up at our reception and be sure to join us for our networking reception immediately after this event. Okay. Now, one last announcement, or just a reminder, the American Democracy Project is nonpartisan. We don't work for or against a political party. We never endorse candidates, and we don't lobby for specific laws or issue positions. So what do we do? Well, much like the library, we are educators, and we try to make information and help people to develop knowledge and skills and democratic with a small d attitudes, the desire to get involved. And then what they do with those skills is up to them. And so when we look at inviting panelists, we don't necessarily invite them to say we are somehow endorsing every single thing that their organization has ever done or will ever do. We invite them because they are known in the community as active folks who really know how to get things done and can share some tips with us. So just a little note based on questions we get about how we choose our speakers. Now, you can see the presenters for today on the overhead, and we are going to actually start this evening with a conversation, and we'll talk about solving community problems. And so here you see some fun panelist bios. These are the more personalized versions, a little bit about the folks with whom I'll be having this conversation for the first part of our presentation. And then after that, we'll turn it over to Sue to talk a little bit about her approach to really being an individual, trying to make a difference on a wide variety of causes. So maybe you aren't the executive director or the board chair of an organization that deals with an issue that you care about, but instead you have a bunch of issues that you really want to, where you want to make a difference. And so she'll talk to us a little bit about her approach. And then Cheryl Ash will talk to us particularly about this need to move beyond simply being an individual who helps one-on-one with people who have needs, but try to create policy change and how we can really look at this issue of finding out who our allies would be who are in power. So state legislators, for example, how do you find out where they stand, and how do you really do that research that will help you be successful in introducing a new legislation or a change in public policy? So that's the plan. So we will start, I wanted to start by noting that often the first step in really making a difference is to define the problem. Former Senator Bob Graham, who you may know, he was a US Senator from Florida. He has a nice little book called America, the Owner's Manual, and he sets out a little guide for solving problems. And he says the first thing you need to do is really define the problem, right? That if you want to launch a citizenship initiative, you have to understand and clearly state what it is that you want to fix. And two pieces of advice that he really gives is make it broad enough that other people care about it, right? But narrow enough that you can do something about it. And so, for example, saying, I want my neighborhood to be a better place to live is a nice sentiment, but where do you start, right? So a more focused starting point could be, we don't feel safe because crime has increased in our area. Our neighborhood drinking water looks and smells and tastes funny. In the past year, my property taxes have doubled, right? Our daughter is one of 35 children in a kindergarten class. That's more specific and something that you can start to tackle. And so we don't want to be so vague, nor do we want to take a problem that only applies to us and nobody else would be interested in, too narrow. And so my question to the panelists is, what advice do you have for defining a problem in a way that's not so narrow, that affects so few people and you can't build a coalition, or so broad that everybody feels like, well, it's not my personal issue, there's no reason for me to get involved? And we'll start with you, Jamie.
So the first question that you had posed to us was to see about framing the issue in a political wording. And for us, it was really looking at political ideology and how our local Congress representative framed her own policy. So taking something like the minimum wage and framing that within larger issues like reduction of welfare dependency to really target in on what's going to make her listen and agree with it in her own terms. Secondly, to kind of define the problem in more like broad public terms, looking at these as very easily understood sound bites, so like 3 to 5 words that really gets your point across. When I worked on marriage equality, it was love is love. Working on the minimum wage, it's that fight for 15 hashtag, Black Lives Matter. La Casa de Amistad has an amazing campaign going on right now that is no human is illegal, which goes straight to the point. My issue for Portrait South Bend typically takes more than 5 words, so we do a lot of visuals. We have our own branding and our own logo that we get out. And right now I'm wearing a pin that has our Indiana state flag with a uterus instead of a torch to kind of emphasize where my branding's coming from.
Yeah, so Graham says if you really want to tackle this, define it in political terms and define it in public terms. But I think it's hard for us to think about what that means. So those are some great examples. Sam?
A couple things to share on that, and it's interesting, and Sue just mentioned it to me, I normally have my sweater on with either my La Casa logo or my No Human Being is Illegal button, so my branding is off because it was so warm outside. But a couple things when I think about when people are advocating, I go to a lot of city council meetings, and one of the things that's important that is it can't just be about you, right? So we get a lot of people that come up to the microphone and complain like, I'm tired of this happening to my house on my street. Well, the city's not going to allocate resources and time to that. So part of what you've got to do is, who else is that also impacting? So if it's impacting you, it's probably also impacting the person a street over, the person 4 streets over, everybody down your block. And part of the job that I think is really important when you're talking about advocacy is you've got to get, one, a groundswell, but you've got to get other people engaged in that process. So who else does this impact? How do they help me? It can't always just be about you and what impact you might want to get for yourself personally. And so that's one of the things that I always really push a lot. And then bringing information to the table, right? So statistics, regardless of whether you're talking about women's health or immigration reform or education policies, you've got to figure out who is this impacting. And I think all too often, unfortunately, what we're seeing happening in this country is people are only advocating for things that currently matter to them, and other things they just ignore, right? So if you're a senior citizen, people say like, well, we don't care about schools because I don't have kids in school. Yes, but we all care about having an educated society, so we should all care about that. Just like saying, because I'm a man, I don't care about women's health. Well, I'm around women a lot, we should all care about women's health. And so I think that's what's important, is to get everybody involved in those kind of processes, and that's what helps define the problem, because you get other people to the table, not just this is my personal or sometimes selfish concern that I'd like to bring up, but here's some data, stats, other people, here's what we'd like to see done.
That's a perfect transition to my next question, which is that once you identify a decision maker, we had a panel on this, and the 2 pieces of advice that they really gave were do your homework and be respectful. So as you think about actually doing your homework and trying to produce data, whether it's statistics or narrative, that will persuade a decision maker, what advice would you give to somebody, or any examples that you might mention about kind of doing that successfully? Sam?
So and that's all been, in my mind, the way I frame this right now has changed in the last 2 years, and I think has been changing slowly. I think you've got to understand the person who has the ability to make that change, what their lever is, right? So their lever might be worried about an upcoming election, and their lever might be worried about how they're going to fundraise for something, or their lever might be, this is an organization that I've been personally involved with and I want to be involved now, or so part of that homework piece is that, because sometimes all the data in the world to someone who doesn't care about data doesn't matter. And so part of it is finding that. And for example, regardless of what the policy issue is now, a lot of what's driving current policy decisions is corporations and corporate giving. And so I think that's where, as advocates, we're turning our attention to, I'm not going in to tell a senator that I'm going to get people to vote differently if the senator doesn't do this, or congressperson. What we really need to do is those 5 companies that give you all your money, we're going to try to get them to not give you money. And so I think we're slowly, and those are the levers. So I think at the federal level, clearly, it's about what corporations are funding those people and how do we have influence over those corporations. At the local level, it tends to be more about what's her hobby and where does he hang out that I can interact with him somewhere socially and have just a personal conversation. And for her, it's, and so for the individuals we're working with, is what would be a way that you can create a meaningful connection to try to, have a good dialogue. And so I think that's what you've got to figure out is, I talk a lot, I'm an engineer, right? So talking about levers, is what are the different people's levers and how do we pull and push those in ways that are meaningful to our cause?
Yes, good advice. Jamie?
I will add to that and just say that, yes, everything ends up being personal at one point or another. And what I like to do is to go through and see what people have said on the issue and then use that as part of my persuasive argument. When working with Mayor Pete's administration on minimum wage issues, we went back to his own city policies on raising the wage within his own purview of his city employees, and then reiterating that if South Bend was to lead the way with the minimum wage, it would bring us into being a 21st century city that would be full of innovation, which is something that his administration has been trying to push and to kind of fit our own agenda into where they wanted to go.
So bring the data that shows that this move will actually help you to achieve your stated public goals. Okay. We all know that public opinion can matter for a good deal of policy changes. Now, as Sam mentioned, sometimes it's not the public opinion. If somebody's in a district that's a safe district and it's gerrymandered and they know that they'll never lose their seat, maybe you have to use some other leverage. But quite often we have seen bills fail because there's such a public backlash. And the failure to compromise or come to some agreement on healthcare might be one example where so many people not only had their own personalities and their own preferences about what healthcare would look like, but also they heard from a lot of constituents who were concerned, who they hadn't heard from before. So public opinion, the court of public opinion can matter for trying to get your issue on the political agenda or get your vision or policy put through. What advice or tips would you have for how to gauge public opinion or how to build public support for your particular cause? And Jamie, we'll start with you.
So we found that coalitions have been very successful when you have a large number of groups that are backing the same cause. It does lend more strength to the argument, and the stronger it will be. But working cooperatively to really craft these messages to making sure that everybody's needs are accounted for and that everybody's at the table will make that stronger so that you can gain more broad-based public support. So it's really that groundwork that you have to do ahead of time before you go public to get your message correct and secure within the people that need to be supporting it that's really going to make the difference.
Sam?
So I would say two things. One is, trying to make sure your message isn't attackive. So I think from the La Casa de Amistad standpoint, we did this No Human Being is Illegal campaign, and we were giving out buttons and stickers and different things. And we really crafted well our release that we did on that to be very, I don't want to say open-ended, but to not be attacking, not to say like, well, if you don't agree with this, you're racist or you're this or whatever, which might be the case, but at least we weren't insinuating it directly. And so I think we tried to be very much saying like, we would like to provide information on an important topic and be very, fairly direct, but to be, I guess, courteous. I'm trying to think of a good word for how we kind of came up with our campaign. And then also then when people do affront you, to handle that well. So we do get people that disagree with us vehemently and call us or email us, and it's our policy to respond to all of those. I respond to all the emails and say, thank you for your input, we'll take that into consideration on our next press release, have a nice day. And so so at least they know I read it, read their comment. And so we try to do that. So I think that's one of the pieces. The other piece that I think is important when you think about not just getting groundswell, but getting people involved is also figuring out where you probably can have the most impact with people. And so, we often forget this middle ground where oftentimes the far, far left and the far, far right are just lobbying bombs at each other. And everybody in the middle is just kind of collateral damage. Whereas we're not trying to say like, hey, people in the middle about this, you could join us on this side, and people here. And so we forget about that. So it tends to be the extreme arguments that are going at each other, and that's just not useful. And I think that's part of where our No Human Being Illegal campaign was about too, was trying to lobby people in the middle to read our point a little bit more, as it wasn't a stance on immigration, it wasn't a stance on policy, we didn't say anything about the Bridge Act, it was just about, we would like you to stop calling people this, and here's some facts about immigration. And so that I think is important, tact, and then we've got to stop this extreme ends of policy, people fighting each other.
You both mentioned the importance of coalition, not alienating people who might someday be persuaded to be part of your coalition, or at least to listen to you, and building a coalition so that you can create an inclusive message that will attract a wide number of people. It seems like whether you want to fight for new graduation requirements, demand that your college offer a new course, or get a traffic light at a busy stop sign, as you said, Sam, if it's just your problem, nobody will probably listen. So how do you build that coalition? What are some good tips for actually attracting the people you need to your cause and to join with you, and how do you keep that coalition together, at least for the length of this campaign, if not long term? Sam?
So part of, I think, that's important with coalition building, and those that know me in the room, it's about being social. So we have to not just be when, I serve on several coalitions and committees, and it's important that all of us get to know each other, that we connect, because some of these fights are going to be long. Some of these coalitions might never unfortunately see the fruits of their labor. And so I think that's what's important for us to remember, that we're all people and we're trying to support each other. It's easy to get mad at each other when things aren't going our way. And so that's why I think it's important that groups stay social and are still having a good time. I think I go to a lot of, I get invited to a lot of advocate groups and meetings, and some groups is just like so unbelievably boring. I don't want to come back even though the cause is great. Or there's just so much business. It's like, okay, everybody quiet, we're starting to run out of time, we're going to talk about this for 45 minutes and then we're going to go home and blah, and I'm like, if you really care about this, you care about interacting with people who agree with the same thing that you do. And so it should be part of, your everyday life and your connection, and that's how you build the coalition. I think the other piece is by trying to keep some of your interests pretty broad and have areas that you're ready to compromise on. So I never like to meet with a group that says, this is exactly what we're going to do, and there's nothing in between that we will settle on. So you've got to be prepared to say, like, this is what we're working on, and we'll settle on this or settle on that or work with this. You've got to be accommodating to other groups and focuses and to compromise, or else you might actually never see the fruits of your labor. So I think those things are important. At least for me, I like being with a group of folks and working hard on something. And it's important for us to be social, be ready to compromise, and come to the table to create change.
Jamie?
So I certainly agree with Sam. Change is a really long-term process, and in order for it to be sustainable, you need to be really focused on relationship building as part of your coalition building. So I show up to everybody's stuff and hope that they show up to my stuff, and it's a mutual relationship there so that we're all supporting each other. And with Pro-Choice South Bend, we really have a self-care model for advocacy work. We understand that this is going to be a long haul, and so if people need to take breaks, they just need to tell us that that's what they're doing so that we can prepare for that, and that everybody in the team is working productively if they're not on a break. So if you're trying to find people, you probably need people that are going to do stuff and show up and follow through with that stuff, or it's not going to end up working.
Now, another group that we want to attract if we're trying to make change is the media. We talked about this a little bit last week in terms of the advice that the panel gave. They said to know your goals, use a compelling, snappy message, put your story into the heading of your press release, or at least the first few lines, because they may not read much beyond that. They said that it is important to keep an updated media contact list, not only of all the main networks and newspapers and other outlets in your area, but also of the reporters who have covered your events in the past, and to maintain positive relationships with local media, not to give up, keep trying, even if they don't cover all of your events or your press releases. And to really also remember that we can distribute the message ourselves these days through social media. So I wonder, hearing that list, if there are any that stick out at you as most important, if there is anything missing for that list, or any examples you can provide of how any of this advice has really been beneficial to you. Jamie?
So for Pro-Choice South Bend, we have a fairly decisive issue. And so we have worked on canned responses because we're going to get the same questions over and over again, and we need to be prepared for them. The other token of that is that we needed to be prepared for kind of like worst case scenario questions that we were going to get. And this election cycle really taught us that that's what was going to happen. So we had a situation with the press right after the election in which a local representative had proposed to bring a bill to the state house to ban and criminalize abortion. And we had to sit there in our heads screaming, no, what are you doing? You can't do that, Roe v. Wade, and like all that dumb stuff that goes through your head where you just want to scream. But turn that into something that was a good media response that made us sound like we knew what we were talking about, and really put it towards that it was going to be okay, and that there was nothing that we necessarily needed to worry about from our constituency, because this wasn't something that was going to be viable in session. So really put the word out to our supporters that it was going to be okay and that we're going to keep fighting.
A couple of real simple ones I would give. La Casa's been pretty successful getting on TV, and a couple things that we've done, and I share this with every nonprofit that I work with. So we follow every single reporter on Twitter. And the crazy thing is these reporters switch like crazy. So most reporters are really only in our area for a year, maybe two. And so they move a lot. And if you're only sending your press releases to news16@wndu.com, it's not getting seen much. You've got to have a reporter that you're sending it directly to. So we follow them on Twitter, and we tweet them when they do a story about us. We retweet that. We make comments on it. Thanks, Hillary, for coming to our story. We do that stuff because it helps their hits. It helps their follows. It helps that. And then they like it. Then they know, hey, when I do a story with Sam helps me get more likes and retweets. And so we really do that to try to work with the media quite a bit. The other piece I like to share with people is when you do a media interview, think about what your response is going to be and make it very short. I do a lot of media interviews. I watch people do media interviews. If your response is 6 minutes long to a question, they're not going to use your answer. They don't have time on the news for that. So you've got to be like, this is an important issue for the community, and we're glad we're able to share this message. Boom, they'll put that on the news. And then people will read about it on the news story and watch the clips. So I say that, be short with your replies. We follow all of them on all social media, and we help them do their jobs, right? It's that back scratch method. So we help them, and they ideally then help us get our message out. And when we're sending out press releases, we send it directly to reporters. So I send it directly to folks that we've worked with and who've covered stories with us in the past, and that helps.
Now, another issue is using the calendar, and I'm sure Cheryl will talk with us a little bit more about this. This is something that has come up in our sessions, particularly when we talked about the legislative process. John Broden informed us that even though we think about the state legislature as working in the spring, January through April, that if you wanted to get your issue on the agenda, it had better have been back in mid-December or over Thanksgiving to really have a shot at getting it on that year's calendar. And of course, only every other year is a budget year. So if it's going to cost money or needs to be put in the budget, you might be waiting 2 years or more if you don't get it in by early December. And so that was interesting, especially when contrasted with Mark Catan's right saying, oh, we could, get something, and if it was a real emergency, we might be able to make that happen for a few days in a few days for you. And Oliver Davis talking about the schedule of the city council and how we could bring it up that week. A couple weeks after that, maybe we could get the issue resolved. And so knowing that calendar seems to be so important. Have you run up against those kinds of deadlines? Sam, you already mentioned something that Oliver mentioned, which is the political cycle. Are they close to election? How might that affect them, and how amenable they are to working with you on a particular issue? Other ways that trends, cycles, political cycles, business cycles affect your work?
Yeah, I think on the advocacy side, thinking about when especially federal folks are in town, so they're only in town short breaks out of the year as well, and so thinking about that and getting on their calendar, I think, I don't know if I'm talking close enough to the mic, but so that's important. Besides that, I think it is just thinking about what are the hot topic items that are happening and trying to stay ahead of that. And see what's going on, whether it's a healthcare debate or immigration's coming up, and trying to be timely. And that's also why it's important to have coalitions built and ongoing, because you can't just build a coalition quick when a bill drops, because lately they've been dropping faster with less notice. So you've got to have a continued group that's talking about women's health, so when the next thing comes out, then you can, as an organization, decide how you want to address that, versus like, okay, now we need to create an organization to address this new thing that just came out. And then by the time you figure out how you're going to address it, it's done. So that's where I think would be important when we think as advocates about timing and how we want to be involved in things. Same thing with city budgets. City budgets every year, they start working on city budget in June, July, and then they start launching that in the fall. And so it's a 6-month process to launch a 12-month budget. And so if you really want to be involved in it, generally we tend to see people involved in the city budget, at that October meeting when they're passing budget coming saying, I don't like this thing that's in the budget. I'm like, well, they've been having public meetings about this for 9 weeks and you haven't been there, whereas your concern might be uberly valid and I might agree with you. There just isn't an opportunity now to make that change. And then that person falls off the face of the earth and then we don't talk about it next year. So that's the kind of stuff about being consistent, annual, following through.
Jamie?
So I'm going to talk about an ongoing women's health organization coalition. Pro-Choice South Bend is part of the Indiana Reproductive Justice Coalition that was formed after the election. We have representatives down in Indianapolis that are able to sit in on meetings and make meetings with representatives for us so that we can get our voice from South Bend heard down south. And we looked at the legislative calendar, and one of the bills that we had been flagged as a priority to defeat was going to be heard on February 15th. So the day before for Valentine's Day, we made a whole bunch of meetings with everybody on that committee. And then we spent about a month holding Valentine's Day making parties across Indiana, and we collected about 5,000 handmade Valentines for reproductive justice, got them all down to Indianapolis, and then hand-delivered them through those meetings to talk about the bill that we did not want to see get passed. So that was a very effective solution for us that also involved quite a bit of pageantry, which we love doing.
Creative messaging certainly can help. I think the point that you made, Sam, about thinking about when something might become timely is useful. I know at the American Democracy Project, one way that we've gotten really good press is to link whatever we're doing to something that is a national day of some kind. So when Andy was organizing our diversity reading program for Cesar Chavez Day, we knew even if we send a fairly last-minute press release, okay, they're going to need something to recognize that this day didn't come and go with them doing nothing and having no coverage. At the very least, they'll have a big picture of the college students reading in the elementary schools about Chavez so they can in some way recognize this national day. And so that's been very successful for us in a whole host of issues of linking it to something that you know will be coming up and being ready to think about how your group could give that local angle that our local news needs.
Another quick media thing that I like to share with folks is that the media doesn't decide what they're covering until 7 o'clock that morning, every day. So getting your press release out like 9 months early doesn't help. Getting it out 24 hours in advance is about the same. They'll pre-schedule some important stuff, but not a lot. And the other piece is you'll just get bumped. So last Saturday, we had a salsa shutdown we had been working on, and we had 2 stations that said they were going to cover it, and there was an officer involved shooting in Michigan City. Well, everything's been there, and I don't know if you watch the news today, it's all about a dumpster fire in Elkhart, right? Or a landfill, technically. And so, like, if you had planned to have something going on, during that, guess what? They're bumped, and they're all covering that. So that's part of what just gets tricky about getting your message out, too.
If it bleeds, it leads. Now,
Or if it's about Notre Dame football.
Right. Probably some blood involved there, too. So 2 more quick questions so that we can get on to the other presentations and still save a little time for your questions at the end. First of all, funding. Some initiatives cost a lot of money, others may be more volunteer power. Any advice that you can give us about how to find resources to support your initiative? Jamie?
So I wanted to share a story for this one about not needing money to do something really cool. Before I moved here to South Bend, I was an animal shelter manager, and I did lost and found tours for people who were missing pets. And we would have these conversations with people, and they would tell us that, oh, I really want to put up like those really big signs that you can like drive by and you see, but I don't have time to like go to Michael's and get the material and like get all of that together. And so these people would come in and we'd have the same conversation every day. And it would be really frustrating for us because we're like, put up a sign if you want to find your dog. So we had this group of Girl Scouts that had been really dying to work with us, but they're like super little, so I can't like put them in with animals at my shelter. And I don't really want them to clean things because that's not fun for anybody. So what we had them do was harness their ability to do arts and crafts, and they made pre-made signs for people so that they could pick them up as they were doing their lost dog tour and just take them home with them, put in the pictures, write in their phone numbers, and put those up. And our lost animal reclaim rates started going up because of this. So sometimes you kind of just need to like work with what you have and utilize the people power that are already coming to your door.
Yeah, and so from running La Casa, we're a smaller organization, about $500,000 a year, so there, you can talk about grant writing and all that jazz, but there's also easy ways to do things. So like Kristen's here from West Side Wednesday. We run an organization called West Side Wednesday, and we've always wanted to promote businesses and things happening on the West Side, primarily in the Latino neighborhood, Latino-owned businesses on Western Avenue. And, you know, when we would talk to people, they're like, well, I don't even know what's there. Is there anything there? We're like, oh, there's tons of stuff there. Was it safe? Was it this? Is it that? So we just said, let's start a monthly lunch club to get people to come out and have lunch, right? And so we average around 50 people. We've had a peak of 75 people for lunch, and now we're planning our second festival that we're having now. And it was just a way to say, like, look, we want people who haven't been in a neighborhood because they're scared of it or haven't been there to come out to a neighborhood and have lunch. And so that's just a way for us to do advocacy for a neighborhood and create awareness about what's happening in our city. And it hasn't cost us a penny until the festivals. Those cost a little bit of money, but the lunch things didn't cost anything. The other piece is that I think is important is, and I think it's been nice lately with like GoFundMes and Kickstarters and all that kind of stuff, you can raise money for things, and that's also where you have to find that groundswell first. If it's just you trying to do a thing and you make a GoFundMe page, it's probably not gonna be great. You know, but if it's you with a group of 50 people who are really passionate about something that you know other people care about, it's easier to go out and ask for money and everybody get 20 bucks from a friend or whatever, and you can get that done to come up with some money, whether it's for arts and crafts or for posters or for gas to go down to Indianapolis. You can do that. And so that's also where all these pieces tie into each other with coalition building, having a group, engaging others, so you can be successful.
Any final advice, particularly when it comes to that period when you need to persuade a decision maker or in really learning from defeat or capitalizing on victory, make sure that whatever you fought for doesn't simply disappear? Sam?
Me? Well, one, I kind of had, as more of a wrap-up than anything, what I've struggled with advocacy in this area, and I recommend, especially thinking about kind of defeat to a certain extent, I get a lot of people that reach out to me or through La Casa or me personally and say, you know, I want to help. I'm like, okay, great, you know, and I'm like, could you do this? Nah, I don't have time for that. What about this? Nah, I'm busy on Tuesdays. What about this? Well, could you give us 50 bucks? Nah. You know, and then we kind of fall off, right? And then 6 months later, it's like, hey, let me know how I can help. And it's like, oh, do that again. And so I think it's important that if you care about a cause, you find something you can do. Or you've got to sacrifice, you know, a little bit to say, I won't get the new Apple Watch, right? I still wear my college Fossil watch because I want to be able to support this cause. Or I'm going to skip poker night with the guys because I want to be able to do this. I mean, you guys saw my bio, right? My race car is currently broken. I don't have time to fix it. You know, and so things like that I think is important. If we want to see victory, we've got to sacrifice something. You've got to be willing to ask other people to sacrifice stuff, and you can only do that if you're sacrificing. And so it's important for all of us to give what we can give, and I use the example of time, talent, and treasure. People can bring us one of those three things, and so figure out what that is that you can bring the easiest or most readily available, or all three, and bring that to the table if you really want to support a cause, and that's what will help get things moving.
Jamie.
I think that the most important thing that I've learned with a lot of defeat that has been in the air lately has been to keep going and to rely on these relationships that you've built. We were feeling really down after the last election, and being able to start planning immediately after that for the People's Inauguration that was that Friday. So I was in a room full of people that I love working with. Every week we were planning something that was a spirit of inclusion and togetherness to really promote a positive message for a day that none of us were really going to be in a good mood. And I got there super early. We did a bunch of press conferences, and then I got to have Thai food in a room full of wonderful people and watch the inauguration happen, and then head off to the Islamic Society and be treated to a really wonderful night full of warm people who were all kind of sharing the same message. So being in that moment of solidarity really helped me move forward and refocus and get ready for what's ahead.
Okay, so regardless of your cause, the coalition and the relationships that you mentioned early can help you not only have someone to celebrate with when you're victorious, but also console you and figure out how to move forward if you're not successful. Thank you so much to Jamie and Sam for that great advice, and you'll have a few minutes for questions at the end. And now we'll turn to Sue, who is going to talk to us a little bit about being a community advocate. Sue really got involved at age 5 already, making pot holders for folks who were tornado victims. As a teen, she started working on Habitat houses. Her mother was obviously very politically involved, but also involved in volunteering. And she says she's born into a family who believed one person can make a difference, and you are that person. So you'll see that in her message. Here are some of the groups that she has founded and some of the issues that matter to her. And then also, she is active on social media, and so she's a page administrator for a number of organizations as well to build those coalitions in the virtual world and then hope that people act in the real world. And so I will turn it over to Sue, who's going to share some ideas with us.
Well, the first thing I'd like you to think about is that volunteering is really the ultimate exercise in democracy, because you're putting yourself into making the community that you want. And so that's kind of the mindset I have. I don't always leave it up to someone else. I can't take on everything, but I also remember that if I need to put myself into what I want in my community. There we go.
I can do that. Can we do that for you?
Oh, okay, that's fine, great. So I think this really sums up a lot of my philosophy. I said somebody should do something about that. And then I realized I'm that somebody. So if you find yourself in the community or with some problem and you go, somebody should do something about that, turn the finger around, because you're the person that needs to be doing something about it if you feel strongly about it. That's kind of your insight to get busy. And you know, not just griping on social media, because all that does is take up airspace and time with friends that could be enjoying something else. So griping about something doesn't really work, which is why I'll get to the point where I'm talking about the 3-3-3 advocacy method. I grew up with the family values. We're all able to make a difference in the world by how we choose to volunteer. My grandfather started Habitat for Humanity on Koinonia Farms, and I worked on those first houses. His initial thought of building Habitat was, first of all, to give people adequate housing for sharecroppers. They lived in horrible conditions. The second thing was, which got him in a lot of hot water, which was a real part of the civil rights movement, is if you couldn't vote unless you were a landowner. And so it was really disruptive for him to build these houses for people, because now suddenly not only did they have a nice home, but they could vote and they could actually change the directions of things. So he started with one purpose. It ended up taking off and, as you know, becoming international. Habitat is international. And we've got a Habitat Day coming up, or we did. I guess it's April 22nd. I also make it my daily thought or affirmation to do random acts of kindness. I think that makes a kinder, gentler community. Just to be friendly, just to smile, just to do something nice. And if I can, I do it anonymously. And oftentimes I'll leave these little cards. That's the front and back of the cards. I think advocacy can just be for one person at that moment. It doesn't have to be something huge all the time. It can also be for speaking up for someone or a group. Maybe someone's kind of shy about something, or they're not sure who to talk to. I've gotten a couple messages recently saying, look, I know about this problem, but I don't know how to go about it, but you're a community person. I'm sure you know someone. So sometimes I speak up for someone else. And another thing I do on a regular basis, every week I go through and I scan grants that are available. Every week there's a new list. And I end up, if I see a grant that'll work for someone, I forwarded it, like Sam. I forwarded, I think, one on for kids, exceptional kids that were immigrants and things like that. April Ladinsky's gotten some of mine. She was one of the panelists before. If I see something, I send them the grant. they may or may not use it, but at least they know about it. So I call that 5-second activism, advocacy. So that's one of the things I do. The other thing I did with Sam was I became aware of a library program. We're talking about the library here, where they have an electronic library card for kids where the parent does not have to sign or fill in for the kid to get the library card. Well, in a case with the group that you're working with, a lot of times the parent may not even know how to read the form or be very hesitant to sign a form. So by letting Sam know about this program, hopefully the ripple effect would be, I didn't do much other than my 5 seconds of shooting it over to Sam, knowing that he could handle it for his community if he decided to. And
The PR for that program is now in 2 languages, and we stock the cards at La Casa, so.
Yay. I never know what ripple I'm going to create, and I don't worry about it. I put it out there. If the ripple happens, it does, which is awesome. I didn't know that. Thank you. I'm glad to know. And I also, sometimes I'll make a call to make sure a person or group gets something. So one of the things I started doing, I made a call because the kids at Madison Center needed winter scarves. They were getting coats from Cypress, but they weren't getting mittens and scarves. And so I put a call out and got all these scarves donated. My friend Hope here, she helped me deliver them. She was the elf that helped deliver them. And I found out that these kids often may not have heating in their homes, and they actually sleep in those scarves and mittens, that it's more than just something to go with their coat. So sometimes it's just me making a connection and making it happen. And speaking of small things, I'm really, you'll appreciate this, supporting the spay and neuter movement. But I'm focused on some other areas. So sometimes you can just do the smallest thing. Our local spay and neuter clinic, ABC, really needs newspapers, like lots of them on a regular basis. So I get the newspapers from my neighbors and I drop them off. Now, you may say, well, that's a really tiny thing, but it helps me with one small thing, like you were saying, time and treasure and and talent. So this is one small thing I can do on an ongoing basis that doesn't take a lot of time. So if you see there's something you can do for an organization, don't worry about how small it is. You know, everything adds up. That little bit just adds up. So with small acts change our community. You can set an example to others and create a ripple effect that way. People have said, oh, that's kind of neat. I always think, well, what can I do about it? But, sometimes there is something you can do about it, even if it's little. And I started helping a friend 4 years ago. She said, hey, I found this dog. You're a computer person. Find the owner. And so I put up a Facebook page, and sure enough, I found the owner. Turns out it was a guy who worked at Panera, where I get my broccoli cheddar soup. Small world. But 4 years later, I have over 5,300 people on my missing dog page, and have reunited over 200 dogs in those 400 years. So what started out as just something small turned out to be something much bigger. And I've actually connected with lost and found groups all over the nation, and I put out PSAs for them. I'm good with Photoshop. I put out PSAs during Halloween, 4th of July, things like that. So actually my ripple has expanded over the 4 years. So every little bit adds up. I got a message from Facebook, and it says, thank you, you've helped 11,262 people. And I went, whoa, okay. I'm not quite sure how they figured out the metric. I am an administrator on a lot of pages. I'm also connected with a lot of people that are super users, you would call, that have a good following, that have good content. So nationally, I do have some good connections. I will tell you, social media is very powerful. I mean, the fact that Facebook told me I helped 11,262 people is mind-boggling to me. But social media, one of the things I want you to think about if you're going to do something social media-wise is the average age on Facebook is 50 years old. So that's the demographic you're going to hit with Facebook. The average age on Twitter is 20 to 30 years old. So depending on what your message is how you can kind of figure out where your media needs to be. Across all media, and I applaud Sam for his branding, I use the color and the logo across all my branding, my web page, my Facebook page, my Twitter, any of the brochures I put out, so that there's that recognition. It's not like, oh, what is this? There's, when that red rose comes across, I know it's La Casa, and I don't really have to think about that. Public service announcements is advocacy. This PSA, this is just example, you'll appreciate this, spay and neuter. Because I'm already connected in the dog groups and dog communities, I have good SEO reach. And so I worked up this PSA for spay and neuter license plates. The state funding is going to be shortfall on that, and so the spay and neuter of Indiana said, oh no, we're running short, and that's going to mean an increase in animals, and then that means an increase in the shelters, and then that takes more tax money and more euthanizing. So I said, okay, I worked this up, and ultimately I reached 3,400 people in about 4 hours. That's how powerful it is, because I'm already, you talk about coalition building, there's actually coalition building online as well. And so being part of all those, I can send it out to lost found administrators all over the state and say, hey, got a PSA for you. So they take it, 2 seconds later, it's gone out on their group, and it's kind of a groundswell. I always think you need to be specific. I always have a call to action. I say, please like, share, and thank you. And then I share it to my feeder groups. I found that if I ask the admins to post it, it goes more viral, because when an admin posts something, it has a higher ranking or push in social media. The one post will be fresh for about 3 hours. And then Facebook's on to something else. We have that short attention span, and they've got other things to push out. If you can get 1,000 views in under an hour, you're going to go viral. And usually, typically, 3,000 to 5,000 views. Because they've decided if 1,000 people want to see it in 1 hour, this is good stuff, and we're going to push it, and they move you to the top of the line. I will tell you, timing matters in social media. If you put something out Monday morning, it's going to be dead as a doornail, because everybody's gone off to work, nobody's looking at Facebook. If you really want something to go viral, you have to know when your particular demographic is watching. My demographic is watching Sunday around 6:30 to 7 p.m. And then I get that 3-hour window before they go to bed. So some of it really is timing. I mean, you talk about calendar timing, but there's also social media timing as well. And on this case, there was a spay neuter, a low-cost thing, and I passed it on to Sam so he could let the Hispanic DJs in the area, the 2 radio stations, put it out so that community could take advantage of spay and neuter as well. So again, as you can see, good coalition here with Sam for me. And I found that one of the things about reuniting over 200 dogs is, I thought, man, there's got to be something else to do. And I thought, if these dogs had a chip and they had a 10-digit phone number tag, the shelter may never see them. Because not everybody will put a dog in a car and go take it to be scanned. But they may look at a tag, and if it's a phone number, go, hey, I got your dog here. Dog goes home, we've skipped the whole shelter trauma. And so there's actually timing with lost and found dogs. There's 5 times a year there are more lost and found dogs. So I sat down with our shelter manager in South Bend, and I said, look, coming up, she's new to the shelter, I said, there's 5 busy seasons. And 4th of July is the busy season for lost and found dogs because of all the fireworks, and they go bolting. So by having the chip and tag right before these busy times, we're also educating the public. Make sure the pet is, inside, do these things, make sure you have a chip. And so actually it's helped reduce things. And so I think when you look at a community problem, don't just look at the problem, look at it perhaps earlier, how can it be prevented? And that was one of these cases. So I've got 5 events coming up on that. As a result of that, I also created a website called Fab4Dogs. I have a branding, my brochure. I took this brochure to the Animal Day in Indianapolis, and it has all the areas of legislation that I want to see addressed. There's quite a few, I got quite an education doing this for 4 years of just all the things that go on with dogs. I got together with Humane Society and did some cross-promotion. And so now there is, in Indiana, there will be legislation on not being able to leave your pet in a hot car. So that was one of the most recent ones, and so that was really nice. My tech programmer side, I realize there's a lot of different, a lot of tech people are introverts, and I was aware of all these different user groups and things like that, but they didn't seem to know about each other, so there was a lot of duplication of effort. So I put all the resources together on one website, so if you want to go look and you want to find out about different tech stuff in our community. I've been adding to that. I also did it as a base for getting the South Bend Maker Faire here. Maker Faire is kind of a gold standard of putting your community on the tech map nationally. And so I was pleased that took 3 years of work. That wasn't one of those quick things. So if you know of some tech organizations that aren't on here, please let me know. Michiana Yardners, I started out working with Unity Gardens about 8 years ago. And I'm the only citizen that stood up for them for the bee ordinance. So there's at least one citizen that wanted that. An offshoot of this was Michiana Yardners. Not everybody wanted to go to Unity Gardens and garden, so this was how to do gardening in their own lawn. And then one of the things I did real quick was there was a protest for the pipeline. And so I think it's important if you're going to protest that you give people action items. So I created these handouts to be given out. And then I think it's important to support other coalitions. And so I did a 5-minute thing there, and I'm also working to bring bras to the YWCA shelter, since that's something they need. I won't go into too much depth on this 333 advocacy because you have a handout. But I think you need, if you're trying to focus, get out a piece of paper, write 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and fill those things out, because if you're clear and focused, you're going to have a clear and focused message. One of the things I did was keep your family safe. You'll be able to download this maybe if you're interested. So I did this for seniors who wanted to feel safe, and that's an ongoing thing. And as a citizen, I walked into the county council and I said, so I want to change part of an ordinance. How do I do that? And the answer was, go get a lawyer and come back. What? That's not in the average person's budget. And so I created with Notre Dame, I created Write My Law. And so you as citizens, if you want to research something in particular, there's a search tip page on there with a lot of great things to do. And it's important to know what you're doing, and, like know about what law exists before you go in and change something. So this is my definition of an advocate. And find the gap that you see that needs to be changed, because that's going to be your gift and your passion. At first they'll ask, why are you doing it? And the person that asked me that is my husband. And later they'll ask you how you did it, which is Dr. Benyon, thank you. And so volunteer. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can, because apathy is the enemy. And believe that you're capable of making it happen, because you are. If I can do it, you can do it. Thank you.
Now, one of the things the National American Democracy Project has tried to stress is that individual one-on-one volunteering alone, going and serving food at a shelter, going and volunteering at a pet shelter, is not enough. We need to figure out how to create long-term social change, policy change that make it no longer necessary that people have to deal with so many problems one-on-one. One of the things I like about the model of volunteerism that Sue shared with us today is that it's not only about her doing something personally, but also about finding ways then to create programs that will make a difference, that will have that ripple effect, that will engage others to really make a difference. So it's not just the one person, but it becomes a community effort. And so thank you for sharing that with us. Now we turn to Cheryl Ash. Some of you, well, probably all of you are familiar with Cheryl's work, but you've also heard her asking some really excellent questions during the Civic Leadership Academy. And one of her areas of expertise really is in that difficult issue of, okay, you really do want to make a change to the law or to public policy, but how the heck do you go about it? How do you find which legislators will be your allies? How do you actually figure out what to do in this complicated process? And so she's going to talk to us about that.
Okay, well, I'm going to make a few comments about some things that were said earlier. I didn't realize until I got the handout that I had identified a public policy, and what was the other one? I think it was called private.
Public and political.
Political. Well, I'll give you an example. What I do is I advocate for changes in laws and policies that deal with people who have criminal records. The issue I'm working on presently and for the last 5 years is people convicted of drug felonies being able to get food stamps. If you are convicted of a drug felony, you may not get food stamps for the rest of your life, even if you qualified. When I started out, there were like 23 states that still had this law. It's a federal law, but you have the option to opt out. Indiana now is only one of 6 states that still has it. So I say when Texas and Georgia, opt out of the law, Indiana, you're not following a trend. Okay, but I'm going to tell you an example here. The political side of it was looking at my state, and how did I find that information out? You've got to read, and more read. And you can't just read what you like. You know what I'm saying? You just can't watch on TV what you like. So my friends hate me for this, but when I'm riding them around places, and I have on Fox News, and they're like, take like this. But I listen to Fox because I know I will hear people talk about a lot of issues, but one of the things they're going to talk about is criminal justice and food stamps. So I get an idea what the more conservative people are concerned about. And they're concerned about people selling their food stamps for drugs, okay? Now, when it comes to the public side of it, I call it, you all out there, you all are interested in that too, but what the state is really interested in is money. Okay? How do they save money? Is this going to cost them more money if they enact this law? And then also the other side is, how do you keep the people who get food stamps, who have drug felonies, from using the food stamps to trade for drugs? Okay, so once I learned that was a big concern, and how did I learn it was a big concern? Well, to be honest, I'm just by myself, okay? And up until 2 years ago, nobody, right? So I was doing it. I could ask for an appointment with the state legislators. I would ask for it in the summer. I would ask for it outside of the legislative session. They turned me down. I didn't know anyone in other parts of the state who I could say, would you ask your legislator for an appointment, and I would go along. And that's really important. If you can find people in other parts of the state so that's their representative, and you can say, hey, Mike, could you get an appointment with your legislator? I'm just starting to get to that point now after 5 years. But what I could talk to were the legislative assistants. And I can't really stress how important, even though you're not going to talk with the actual senator or representative in Indianapolis, I got an earful from the legislative assistants. I know why certain people feel certain ways about my bill. And I got real insight, because they're willing to talk to you for 15, 20 minutes to a half an hour. And so when I framed it from a public standpoint, I'll call it public, and I found out most people weren't really interested in issues of that. There's more people going back to prison. We need to find a way to save money so we don't have to build 2 new prisons. They were more interested in the human side of it. Children and parents are not eating. So I began to talk about people I'd run into who, although the state will tell you children can get food stamps, it's a lot of policy and it's too hard to explain. But I homed in on that. And I worked with a bunch of Notre Dame students, and they made me an iMovie of about 6 minutes where I got 4 women, because, you know, women tug at your heart. Okay, I got 4 women who told their story. 2 said, this is by being able to get food stamps, this is how my life has improved. By not being able to get food stamps, this is how my life did not improve. And that included a married woman who was pregnant, and she was unable to get food stamps. Okay, and that really hit people. And then I began to get people to talk about this issue with other people. How do I gauge? That's how I would gauge my public thing. I even was with my orthopedic and my dentist, and we always talk. I bring up, what are you doing? And then I say, well, you know, I'm working on this bill. And I've even had my orthopedic doctor go get 2 other doctors so I could tell them about what's happening to these mothers who can't get food. And that's how you start to gauge. Now, research is really important. And since I work on state issues, one of the things I make sure I do is, and I left my library card, but you can go to the public library site for South Bend, and they have a database of newspapers. And I pick all the newspapers in town for Indiana, and I periodically read through there. But I'm going to start with the, I'll go back to the beginning, and in case I don't get to go through anything, I just wanted to mention that. But the very, very beginning is the Indiana General Assembly. That's the website I use. And she's going to click on it for me. This is what it looks like. Now, I'm actually going to make it easy. If you will touch information for me. I realized suddenly after I did this, okay, these are the various things that are down under information. What do I make use of? I tend to look at things such as, I'm looking for it, find your legislator, okay? And if you come down, you'll see where it says find your legislator, okay? Put in, my address is 3830 Langley, Langley, South Bend, Indiana, 46614. Okay. And then this tells me who my legislator is. Well, what it is I'll have some people say, oh, I'll write something, sure, but I don't know how to find my legislator. So I get their address, and then I send to them who their legislator is. Okay? If I'm looking for, say, a legislator in another city, I will simply go to the public library in that city and type in the address, and I begin to see who the legislator is. And the maps are a little hard to use on here. But see, I've got the address. You can click on, get the phone number, and all. And so that's where I get their names. Now I'm going to go back, if we can go back under to information. That's only I use there. I don't have a calendar. Next is under session. Okay, I come down to session, and I am looking at the Senate calendar. Yes, Senate calendar. And I have to be honest, since we're out of session, I don't know what will show up. But what is on the Senate calendar are the dates. For instance, the dates that within the Senate a bill can no longer be filed. What dates bills have to be filed by. What date the bill has to be in committee and out of committee. What date that everything has to be done in the Senate and sent over to the House. And like I said, because it's the end of the session, they may not have stuff up. When I sent her these, it was still in session. You have the same thing on the House side. You have House calendars. Now, you also have daily calendars. And I think that's what it is it's because they're out of session. And now, the whole session calendar looks like a calendar and has written in dates. These are the daily things that they would be working on. What bills, it's telling you on the other side, it's in the first reading, the second reading, et cetera, which then helps you gauge what's going on. We're going to go back. Now I go to committees. Okay, there are standing committees, non-standing committees. Sometimes when my bill, like it was one thing in the Senate, but it got amended in the House, and if it passes, then it's got to go to a conference committee. So I may want to see what various committees are. And if I click on, my stuff usually goes to either corrections and criminal law. And if I click on that, okay, on this side is the chairperson ranking all the members, okay? So since Republicans control both houses, or House and Senate, the Republicans are at the top, the Democrats are at the bottom. If you will click on to any one of those dates for me. Okay, on this day is what was heard, okay? And could you click on any one of those senators' pictures for me? Okay, I now see what bills this person has passed, has put forth for 2007. By the way, you can go back and check every year what they put out, even if it didn't become a law. And that's how I track where they're at, you know what I mean? If I find someone is putting in a lot of bills that want to test people, want to test welfare mothers, want to test people at, what's the word I'm looking for? Want to test people who get unemployment and all those. I know that's not going to be a good person who's probably going to support my type of legislation. Okay. Just click on any one of those people's names. It doesn't matter. Right there. Now, this is, I don't use that email, okay? Because, click on that email for me where it says send email.
Top left.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, top left. Over.
Middle left.
Yeah, it's.
In the blue bar.
Yeah, click it. The reason I don't use this is, see, it's fill out a form, okay? So I have no record of what I sent them. Okay, I'll try to show you where there's a regular email address. I use a regular email address on my email, so I have a copy of what they sent. And I recently did this with a person, and the answer they gave me back, I was like, so I went back and looked up. Their answer had nothing to do with what I wrote and asked about. So that's why I don't use this, okay? If I can have you go back one for me. Okay, go on up to the top. Can you do legislation for me? Hit bills. These are all the bills that were presented. Okay, now a lot of them never got a hearing. A lot of them never got even, other than the first reading, they never made it to the second reading. The things that are in blue are the things that passed. The things that are not in blue did not pass. But just to give you an idea how many bills are introduced every year. And now here's a House bill. And I just want to show you, you have the author, then you have all these co-authors, okay? And that's a digest of the bill. And now up in the corner, left-hand corner in the blue, that's the latest version of the bill. Okay, but what you need to understand is, if there's been amendments, they do not put it in the latest version. You have to come down and look at House Senate amendments, okay, and click on that. There were no amendments to this. Now click on the Senate. Oh, see, they were 1 to 7. 1 through 6 did not pass, but 7 passed. So click on 7, and up a little bit. Keep going, up to 7. That one passed. Click it. So what I have to do is I have to take that passed, and they do the bills by line number. So I have to take that and compare it to the original bill to see how it changed. I just mention that because people see latest version and think it's not the latest. It's the latest version that was filed, not what doesn't have any amendment to it. And if we can go back one, and like I said, a lot of this is probably not here because the session is over. Now, one thing that's important, if you can hit a bill, like SB1 for me. Okay, you see it says latest physical notes. Click on that. Okay, there's a group called the Legislative, and I forget it, John Broden mentioned. Their job is to tell the state how much it's going to cost to have this bill become a law. And again, because it's over, but it'll say this bill is going to cost X number of dollars. My bill, they were saying they estimated how much it would cost, maybe extra to have some extra caseworkers if the bill passed to register people, but they discussed that that would be offset partially by the money they got from the federal government. You want to know what they think it's going to cost. Now, I saw some stuff in there 2 years ago that I didn't agree with. So I called and talked to the person and asked them how they got their figures. Well, they just called one place, okay, and asked them, how much do you think? See what I'm saying? So when I did some talking, I was able to say it's not going to cost as much as they did, and here's my research that showed you why. If you can go to legislation again for me right quick. Okay, by legislator. Okay. Pick any one of those, doesn't matter. Now I use this and I actually will have like Lloyd's name, and I got 100 sheets of paper or how many ever, and his name's at the top. And then I look to see what kind of bills he did. And I may make a quick note that says Lloyd supported such and such a bill, or Lloyd was this, this, and that. So I know, because I'm really just by myself, I'm not going to spend a lot of time with a certain person, as I said, who's putting through legislation that they're probably not going to be favorable to my cause. And then the next, one more legislation and I'm done. Okay. Let me see. Yes, go back to by subject. Go down and by subject. Now, I am interested in criminal justice system. No disrespect, but I'm not at all interested in acupuncture. So I go down to where it says criminal. And they'll see correction programs, and then I go on each one of those at the beginning of the year, and I follow what bills are being done. And criminal justice, so I follow that. Okay, there was stuff, but it's not there anymore because it's already been voted through. But if you got at the beginning of the year, there would have been a list of laws that, or bills they put forth to deal with criminal justice. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is, or two things. One is, there is something called the Legislative Directory. It's put out by the Chamber of Commerce and in Indianapolis. So it's the Indiana Chamber of Commerce. Like now it's the 2017 Legislative Directory. And yeah, if you can do the first one and then just work your way down for me, would you? And the reason I mention this is it's only about $16 in paper and it's like $9 something for an app on your phone. Why is this good? It gives you a picture of the person so you kind of know what they look like. Because I've gone down and taught and, you know, and caught them in the hallways. It tells you where they live. It tells you where they go to church or what religion they are. It tells you what they belong to, what their profession is. Now, I homed in on the Catholic legislators. Now, why do you say I homed in on that? Well, because I was able a couple of years ago to get the bishops of Indiana to support this bill that I've been working on. So when I email people who are Catholic, I send them a link, okay, where it shows that the bishops are supporting this bill. Okay? So that's why this book is worthwhile. If I notice they're a Kiwanis or something like that, I might even ask a friend who belongs to Kiwanis to email them something. That book is really worth it. They have it at the public library, the reference department. The last thing I want to talk about, and I'm not going to be able to show you this because I popped out of the car real fast and left my purse. That's what it looks like, okay? And then there's some other things that I have found useful on the chamber site. The last thing is at St. Joseph County Public Library. And if you can type in www.sjcpl.org, okay. Do you have your library card? Can you give it to her for that one second? I popped out of the car and left it. Okay, I'm going to learn. I believe it's under Learn. You can go under Learn. Databases online. Okay, now go all the way down for databases, and there's a newspaper one, some places talks about newspapers.
A news bank you just passed us.
Okay, hold on. No. It says newspapers. There it is. Now, wait, keep going. Go slow for me. Okay, newspaper archives. Click that. You've got to type in her number, it won't show. Well, it's not supposed to show. At home, it doesn't show, Rana. And then,
I look young, but my eyes are telling the truth here.
then, can you type in, give her your last name? Oh, she knows, good. Okay. Because you know what? You want to know information about these legends. Actually, you want a dossier on them. That's not a nice way to phrase it, but that's what you want. And then hit inquiry. I'm glad to see I'm not the only one that has trouble seeing the card numbers when I'm typing them at night. Yeah.
She's like, that is not correct.
You know what? When I worked at the library, the only card I could remember was when I first worked from in 1957, it was WE2 because I was the assistant. Once they got all these long numbers, I couldn't. Okay, I want to search, put John Broden in there for me. And then hit search. okay? These are all the places that information about John Broden appeared, okay?
There's some stories in 1910. I didn't know he was that old.
No, he's not. For you don't know, but so I end up looking at, just, I kind of look at the little headings, and then and I know John Broden personally, so I don't really need to do any research on him. But if it was somebody I didn't know, I click on those stories to see what it's about. And half the time, it could be he spoke someplace, okay? But if he spoke at the St. Joseph County Farm Bureau, okay, I mark that because more conservative people speak there, okay? So I he may not be a person who's going to support me, but that's how I research what they've done in the past, what they've talked about and supported in the past. And I guess one last thing I was going to say is money, okay? I don't have any money, okay? I don't have any coach vision. So, like, I begged my priest. Like, I did a postcard campaign, okay? So what I did is I said, I need some postcards, buy them for me, please. And he said, sure. And then all I did is I have like a talking sheet page with the points I think are important to make, because most people don't know anything about the issue. It's a one-page thing, right? And I had it, and I had the postcards. I said, you can say what you want, or you can pick and paraphrase one of these 6 reasons why I think it should become a law. Because a lot of people are going, I don't know what to say. And I'll say, well, don't copy it further, but just use your own words. And that's been really helpful.
Okay, so great information. We figure out who it is who may be an unlikely ally or a good bet, or other ways also to look at their affiliations and think about how we may have other people persuade them to support a cause that we believe in. Well, we are at the 8 o'clock mark, so what we want to do is to take just a very, very few minutes for a question, and then we can continue our Q&A over at the reception. We also have your certificates, and there will be some fruits and veggies and cookies and punch, and so we hope that you will all join us. It's a good time to talk about what you might want us to talk about next. We looked at a needs-based approach here, but of course another valuable way of thinking about civic engagement, they're going to prepare our reception, is to think a little bit about assets and assets that communities have and how you want to strengthen and develop those. And so that's certainly something we'd love to talk about in the future. If you have ideas and things that you'd like to contribute, please do let us know. We'll take just a few minutes for any big questions that you have, and again, then you can also talk with the panelists one-on-one. Yes, Pam.
Cheryl, you mentioned you had a way to not use that submission form on the website. Tell us your trick.
Okay, I cannot remember where it is on the...
You gotta go to the Democrat site or the Republican site.
And you
It's
can
a
get their
Friday.
actual email.
Oh, you just get their email, direct email.
Yep.
Yeah, that way I have a thing of what I did. I'll give you my email address because I actually had another site I found before I found it there. Another coalition actually had their addresses. My email is C, like my first name, L like Larry, A like Apple, S like Sam, E like egg, 1952 at hotmail.com. So that's CLASHE 1952 at hotmail.com. And I can send you the one I use, and I'll send you the link.
Yes.
I just want to say I love you so much.
But she said she loves you so much.
Librarian, but you just gave us so much knowledge, and I truly appreciate it.
I just want to say, okay, people underestimate what is available through your public library. And I can't stress that enough. You know what I'm saying? Like that legislative book. It is a godsend if you can't afford to buy it for some reason. And, you didn't hear me say this, but you want to photocopy the pages you want. It is that book. That book is on the phone app of all the professional lobbyists. Because I can tell you, when I've gone to Indianapolis, I've leaned against there, and I'm leaning against professional lobbyists, and they're looking on their smartphones for information. And
That's what I did my dissertation. It was in 3 state legislators, and everybody had the hard copy versions of the legislative guides, and they'd be looking and looking. And they're like, is that? I'm like, yes. I thought
And
I matched it to the picture.
the
Yeah.
reason you want it is because I was at a restaurant in Elkhart, and I remembered seeing this face, and I walked up and I said, aren't you Senator? I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. And while we're both standing in line at IHOP waiting, I started talking to him. But I remembered his face. I didn't remember his whole name. I just knew he was a senator. That's why that book's important. You know their faces.
All right, a couple more.
I'd like to add one more thing about the library. They have a wonderful free online course for grant writing. There's 3 grant writing courses on there for free. So if you're looking for money and you want to know how to write grants, the library is gracious to offer that to us.
And I may say, you know that the library is a co-sponsor of this series, but to the best of my knowledge, they didn't pay any of these people to say these things. So, yeah, great resource. And one of the reasons the library is a perfect partner for this kind of an event. All right, yes.
Thank you for offering that.
It's harder to make those face-to-face relations. Do you have any tips for that?
Well, a lot of times, like in the Yarders, I'll put events. I go to some of those. So if you're in a group or whatever and they have an event, sometimes that's the best way to make that connection. And thank you for the bathhouse.
Okay. Now we have so much to think about, and you probably have more questions one-on-one for Jamie and Sam and Sue and Cheryl. So just a quick opportunity to thank our panelists, and then we'll go on to our reception.